Good evening. Welcome to the September 21st edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Keeping with best practice guidance from the CDC, IDPH, and DuPage County Health Department, we are once again expecting those who are in village buildings, including this one, to wear masks. As is our custom, we'll begin tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit, here, Commissioner Culvaney,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here. Thank you. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the September 14, 2021 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you all. Item 4 on our agenda tonight, we have, continuing in September, a few proclamations. The first is Good Neighbor Day. Whereas the noblest human concern is concern for others, and that concern leads to understanding, love, and respect that builds cohesive families and communities. Whereas acts of neighborliness are often simple gestures that help us be a good neighbor, lift up others, or make our community a place we love. And whereas these acts of kindness impact giver, receiver, and observer in often immeasurable positive ways. Whereas a sense of community is strengthened and expressed in our neighborhoods where we give each other the opportunity to share and feel part of a larger family. And whereas kindness and neighborliness are traits understood and appreciated across races, genders, generations, and religions. Whereas on September 22nd, 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed Proclamation 4601, establishing September 24th, 1978, as Good Neighbor Day. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim September 28th, 2021, to be Good Neighbor Day in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all citizens to pledge to be a good neighbor, with the goal of becoming a more connected and caring community, to be the person who lives with kindness and concern for their neighbors, to take the first step of connecting with neighbors and introducing yourself, practicing the good neighbor mindset to make connections, invitations, stay awake, and be available to my neighbors. Indeed, good neighbors make great neighborhoods. Dated this 21st day of September, 2021, Downers Grove. We also have Constitution Week. Whereas September 17th, 2021 marks the 234th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the 1787 Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion. Whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore, I, Robert Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd, 2021 to be Constitution Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties. Dated this 21st day of September, 2021, Downers Grove, Illinois. Just like that, we're on to item 5 on our agenda tonight, public comments. It's Good Neighbor Week. Let's all remember Good Neighbor Week. Public comments is the opportunity in our meeting to hear from the audience and the community on items not on tonight's agenda. A couple of guidelines just to keep in mind. Please state your name for the record. Keep the comments to 5 minutes or less. There's no need to repeat what others might already have said. Remember, it's an opportunity to be heard. It is not a debate. And if there are any questions posed, we may well address those at a later date. With that, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Cynthia Zeski. I live at 1130 Franklin Street in Downers Grove. I am on Prince and Franklin. I want to start by saying that I realize, as my neighbors that are here with me, that there is an issue on Prairie and Forest. We are not unsympathetic. However, the result of closing off Forest has just moved the problem to Prince Street. The primary issue I want to discuss is that of safety for all residents of Downers Grove, not just a select block. By closing Forest, the city has created an untenable increase in traffic and increased safety risk on Prince, Prairie, and Franklin. This morning, as evidenced by the video I sent to you, motorists were using Prince Street in both directions in significant numbers. That was not just one moment in time. That was 2 hours long. 4, 5, 6 cars, all 4 directions like that. We, on a daily basis, probably have 1 car, maybe 2. The situation created an unsafe atmosphere in the location of that area. There were kids walking. If you saw, there was a kid on a bike trying to cross the street there who couldn't get across the street anymore. He goes that way every day without a problem until today. They had a late start on Monday, so the traffic was different. It was still heavy, but the kids weren't moving at the same time. We were told on average that Prince Street has 300 cars pass through on a daily basis. Today, we counted 300 cars from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. alone. In addition, in the evening, between the hours of 4 to 6 p.m., we counted another 300 cars. And then on average, 50 cars an hour down our street. That's 1,000 cars. That is an increase of 300%. 300%. The stop signs at both ends of Prince are not being obeyed. On our block alone, we have every house but one on the east side has children under the age of 9 years old that play in the front of their homes. And now we have 1,000 cars going down the street, yelling, slow down. That's what we're doing. Slow down. Use Main Street. They don't care. They step on the gas and flip us the bird. You know, it's horrible. The stop signs are not being obeyed. There's people walking their dogs. There's commuters. There's Prince Pond is 1 block away on Franklin. That's a whole nother issue. Franklin Street's become a highway. The load limits are not being adhered to. Yesterday morning, we were sitting on the front porch, and 2 long beds with lumber came down Prince Street and turned on Franklin and took off on their merry way. They rolled over the curb in the oncoming traffic because they couldn't make the turn onto Franklin. Some other reasons that it's unsuitable for this situation, we as homeowners on the brick streets paid a special tax assessment to have this type of street. These brick streets add to the charm of the neighborhood and to Downers Grove. The increase of traffic is horrible for the durability of these brick roads. In the winter, the streets are not plowed down to the brick to preserve the bricks, and it creates like an icing, and you have to be aware of that because it's a little more slippy. And if you don't know that, you're going to slide right into the back. These are kids going to school, people going to Main Street, whatever. They're not going to know, and there's going to be a bunch of fender benders. Brick roads are noisier than paved roads. An increase in traffic causes a reduction in the enjoyment of homeowners and the reduction of property value. We, including the residents on Forest, had the opportunity to survey a traffic situation in our neighborhood prior to the purchase of our homes. I would not have purchased my home with the traffic pattern that is going through right now. I adamantly would not live there. I'm very unhappy. Prince and Franklin flood profusely. I don't know if you got the picture, but that's I'm not talking 2 inches deep. We're knee deep in water from the middle of Prince Street all the way around the corner into Franklin. Not only that, Prairie floods there too, behind the red house on the corner. They also get water. So now we've got 1,000 cars going through there on a given school day or whatever, and it's flooded. So what are they going to do? Well, they do one of 2 things. They stop, try to make a 3-point turn to turn around. Now we're 5 cars deep. How's that going to happen? So they're going to go through. And the water is literally up to our garage and our front doors. What happens when you take a vehicle and pull it through water? Well, it either stalls, or you have water now down your basement and into your homes or into your garages. We live in a vibrant downtown community close to numerous schools, parks, shopping, and restaurants. The increase in traffic down our street is a price we all pay and was or should have been known prior to our home purchase. Forest is 1 block from Main, walking distance to 3 schools, and a through access to the back of downtown. It is understandable and foreseeable that Forest would have an additional traffic on it. Closing a city street and giving a select group of residents a private street is inequitable to the rest of us who live there. I also spoke to the sanitation workers today. He could not turn around, he didn't have the room. He said he had to back down Forest with cars parked there, people walking. So if you back down Forest, he's backing up into the stem of the root of the problem. So people are coming across the tracks up to Franklin. He's now backing into that traffic. There's no stop sign coming from Maine. And he had to three-point it there. He said it was horrible. Not only that, our garbage comes at about 8 a.m., which is when the kids are walking to St. Joe's down Franklin, right at that intersection, and our recycling at 8, our 2 p.m. pickup for garbage is when St. Joe's lets out. And that poor guy had to back down the street. The fact is, there's a certain amount of traffic that passes through daily. It is only fair that Forest bears some of the brunt of that traffic. None of us should be immune to traffic. The city owes everyone in the neighborhood safe streets, safe transportation, and a better solution which does not adversely affect some property values and give inequitable increases to others. We need a solution that will safely benefit an entire neighborhood, not just one street. And I found something before I came on traffic counting that is written by the Downers Grove Public Works.
Hey, Cindy?
Yes. All right, I will wrap it up, but find this. It basically says that avoid restricting reasonable access. Use self-enforcing measures where appropriate. Traffic calming measures shall not intentionally relocate the same problem to another street or neighborhood. I'll end on that
Give a
note.
copy of that to the end of the desk there, and we'll make sure everybody gets a copy.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, residents. My name is David Olson. I live at 5613 Dunham Road in Downers Grove. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I first want to say I do understand the challenge that you all face. Having sat in those chairs before, it's difficult to balance the safety of residents, but of course, the movement and flow of people and traffic throughout our community. As Cindy mentioned, we do have a vibrant downtown, and I want to speak to the issue of the traffic barricade that's been placed on Forest on the south side of Prairie. I do not live in the neighborhood. As I stated, I live on Dunham Road, just south of 55th Street. I do not live in the neighborhood. However, I do travel through our town to get to downtown, to get to places on Ogden Avenue, sometimes at events at North High School, etc., to get to work at times. So the challenge that has been created by placing this barricade, I think, has been very accurately and demonstrated and discussed, and the impact on surrounding streets just going to be exacerbated by closing this one street. But I also want to comment from the perspective of a resident who does not live in the area, but travels through the area from time to time. This is a layout of streets that was laid out over 100 years ago. Forest Avenue has always been a railroad crossing. It has always been used by many residents of Downers Grove to travel around downtown or through downtown or to downtown, depending on where you're coming to and from in our community. And it's very critical, I think, that we balance both the safety aspects, as I think there are some really great measures that are being proposed, the Transportation and Parking Commission, as a result of the traffic study, to help address some of the challenges in the neighborhood, but also the convenience and the ability of traffic to move in Downers Grove. Of course, the safest thing would be if nobody were to drive their cars anywhere, and we were just to walk everywhere. That would be safer than us driving our cars. So naturally, we bear some risk in exiting our own house, in getting in our car, in driving. And so we've got to balance that with the ability to move and the ability for commerce and for individuals to flow. Many individuals in Downers Grove, like myself, were unaware of the discussion about this. Most people in Downers Grove don't follow the village council daily. Most people don't live in that neighborhood and weren't a part of that traffic study. but they are still impacted by this decision. And whether it's adding several minutes to a commute, making it more difficult to get to school, get to North High School, or get to businesses within our community, this is a challenge that needs to be addressed and needs to be considered when these measures are being considered. So I would urge the council to reconsider the blockade of Forest Avenue. I think there are other ways that, without restricting the flow of traffic and closing a street, to address some of the safety concerns in the neighborhood, but also maintain the vibrancy and the flow of traffic throughout our downtown and throughout our community. Traffic will flow. People still need to move in these patterns. And I'll just end on one note. Most of the people that are driving are from Downers Grove. This isn't people from Naperville that are choosing to drive on the street. Many people are people like myself from another part of Downers Grove who are moving throughout our community. We need to have places to do that, and we'll continue. And as the residents on Prince Street have seen, the closure of that street has merely moved an issue and created additional safety hazards on a separate street. So I'd urge the council to reconsider the decision of a couple weeks ago. Of course, I appreciate your time and consideration and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Scott. I'm not a resident of Downers Grove, but I have long connections here. And I'm involved in some activities in town relative to policing and community through the NAACP and through a group called Unity Partnership. My reason for coming to the microphone tonight is to talk about neighborliness. I was glad to see the proclamation tonight, or hear the proclamation, but I wanted to talk about a good neighborliness issue to which I was a part this past weekend, and a bad neighborliness issue that I've heard about and on which I'm looking to get more information. On Sunday at the Gurdwara, the Sikh Gurdwara in Wheaton, there was an open house session, and we had the state's attorney there, Bob Berlin, as well as the sheriff, Mendrick, and 3 police chiefs from the area. And in this open house, they have an event they called Langar, where they serve everybody. You know, you get to enjoy the foods and learn something about the community. And these things occur from time to time, and I would encourage you guys to look, and if you see this, please visit one of the Gurdwaras. The Sikh community is very, very open and very, very interested in building relationships with all of the people who live in this area. On a sad note, after I left Gurdwara, I got a message that told me that there was an incident that occurred in this area relative to what I would consider to be a racial incident aimed at a person of color. It was an ugly incident. I'm looking for more facts about it. I haven't contacted the police yet about it, but I want to learn more about it. And what I would suggest is this. In addition to putting forth a proclamation, I would say please think in terms of taking the next step. By inviting the community, those people who might be dinosaurs and living in the Stone Ages about race, give them some help and understanding that things are changing and that these communities have to be more welcoming to everybody. And also, I would say that, by example, increasing diversity, inclusion, and equity in all things you do will sort of dampen the kinds of experiences that I heard about. And again, I'll give more details as I learn more. But it was used the N-word in an assault on a person. But I want to just say that I'm hopeful and I'm encouraged by the activities I'm seeing in Downers Grove around diversity. And I'm hopeful that those of you who lead the village will take an active role in helping to make this community much more welcoming for everybody who visits and lives here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening. I'm Paul Martinez. I live at 4807 Prince. I'm upset at this whole deal with this closure here that you guys did on Forest. I didn't know that you were having a good neighbor proclamation. You guys just created a big problem. You didn't even realize you did it. You created animosity of all the people on on Forest from surrounding neighbors. You did it. Everybody's resenting these people. They didn't ask for this. They asked for you to fix a problem. They didn't ask for you to move the problem down the road. That road's my road, okay? I used to live on a secondary street in Westmont. I moved because of the heavy traffic. That was on me. I knew it, and I accepted it, and I resent it, and I moved to a quiet street in Downers Grove. I've been a police officer for 26 years. I know aggressive drivers. You took drivers in the past, a month ago, that were aggressively driving to the train station to get to work, and they're even more aggressive driving home. Now you created a driver who's not only aggressive, but they're pissed off that you made them inconvenience their average route that they go. Now they got to go around. Now I could see them. I see these kind of drivers all day long. That's all I look for when I work. I see them now where I live, and they have this attitude of, I'll show them, and they're just hauling ass down my street. I got to put my squad car. I get a squad car, the luxury of bringing one home. Sometimes I put it in front of my car, or in front of my house. It's a marked squad car. They don't care whether somebody's going to hit my car. I mean, it's not my job to deter aggressive drivers. That's your all job. In 4 years I've been here, I have not seen one single police officer do a traffic stop on Prairie. I feel like I should FOIA how many traffic citations were issued for speeding on Prairie. You guys created a monster on Prairie from letting it go with not one single stop sign from Maine all the way to Belmont. When I go to work at 5 in the morning, I would turn my radar gun on. I don't work in this jurisdiction. I can't write a citation. I'm not calling in a local car to say, hey, I'll write the ticket for you guys. That's not my job. They're easily going over 15 miles an hour, the posted limit. I'm not saying the police are doing a bad job. I've never bad talked to police, but I've never seen a traffic stop. Just self-satisfaction, like, good, I'm glad they got you. Slow down. It's ridiculous. When you guys shut down the street to begin with, I didn't see any, not that I know of, any traffic stops pre or post for the surrounding streets of the stop strips where they record how many cars come down Prince before you shut down the street a couple months ago, and there's no strip on my street right now. Our neighbors have to sit there and waste our time counting the cars for you. You're not giving us those stats. Why? Because you don't want us to know that the cars are 300% more?
Hey, Paul, this is turning a real far ways away from good neighbor.
Okay, well,
So when-
you created, you
Hang on a second.
you
Hang on a
created this
second.
monster.
One person gets to talk at a time, and right now it's me.
Yeah.
So what would be really good, I think, for a next step for you, would be to review the tapes of the multiple meetings, I think it's 3, that this council had considering this. Because you need to understand, this wasn't done out of the blue. It wasn't done without neighbor input. Your input was not there, that's true, I admit that. But there were others that spoke against this, resident neighbors of your friends in your neighborhood. And it was a decision that was made to test something, measure it, and understand. So why is there no measurement? Because you got to let people establish patterns. I would think maybe in your profession you'd know that.
Well, yeah.
We're clearly not sitting up here expecting you to sit on your porch and measure, or you to get out your radar gun in the morning. There is a process in play. It's pretty well documented. If you'd like more information, we'll certainly get it to you.
That'd be great.
But you talk about the whole Prairie, yeah, and as I think a couple of your neighbors already mentioned, there's a study for that, which is coming up either this week or next. We're going to learn some more about that. This is a temporary thing. There's a process that got us here and a process that's going to take us forward. And it's very neighborly process. It's very inclusive process. So please be thoughtful, all right?
Well, be thoughtful to us on Prince, because
We are.
we don't want the.
I understand.
We don't want this thing.
I totally understand that.
Hi, I'm Nick Petrarch, 4800 block of Prince as well. I'll be brief. So I have watched the videos. I know there was 2 studies of over 2,000 cars a day down Franklin, or Forest rather. both of which conducted when school is not in session. So I can only assume with high school students back, it's closer to 2,500 or 3,000. However, if you're completely closing that street, that's 2,500 or 3,000 that are going now down Prince, right? If not down Prince, then down Main, where they're closer to St. Joe's, closer to North High School. And so I understand that you're waiting a month for new traffic patterns. I can tell you after 2 days, the pattern is not people trying to avoid Main splitting up between Oakland, Saratoga, other streets. They're going to the next closest street, which is Prince, and they're flying down the road, trying to get downtown. They're flying up the road, trying to get to Ogden, trying to get to 83 or 88. You know, I understand you're not going to do a measure for a month again, but what's it going to find? I understand this is allegedly temporary. You're going to find that Prince, or Forest rather, went from 3,000 cars to 0. Of course they're satisfied. Of course it worked for Forest, but it didn't work for anybody else. And so I'd ask that when you do the study to consider what Forest going to 0 means for everyone else before we decide if it's temporary or permanent. That's all. Thank you.
It's a good point, and that's exactly why we're going to measure. And, you know, it may seem inherently obvious to some, but I think just like we tried to use some data to get here, we're going to try to use some data to make our next decisions as well. Anyone else?
Mayor, Councilman, thank you. I'm Fred Zeski. I live at 1130 Franklin Street. We are aware that there have been many accidents on Prairie and people taking lefts, taking turns, and there have been some serious accidents. We witnessed that, and it's been a concern in the neighborhood. I think putting in the stop sign was a very thoughtful decision. As was indicated, the speed on Prairie can be excessive at times, and there's a lot of traffic that flows to Prairie to avoid Ogden Avenue. So if you're familiar with that area, you're well aware that many people use that as a shortcut to avoid the lights. And so as you're approaching the light at Main Street, and they see that the light is green, a lot of cars will accelerate right as people are trying to take a left or take a right. And we've witnessed that. We've witnessed near accidents, and I know you're well aware of other accidents that happen. So I think everyone in the neighborhood is appreciative of the effort to have a safe environment there and recognizing that that is a problem. I think what we're very concerned about is that we have, in the attempt to solve the problem, we've potentially shifted it now to a street over where that same dynamic is starting to develop, which is, if you saw the cars stacked up, people can't get across and they can't get to the right, so they're getting frustrated and more aggressive. And I think as you continue your study, you're going to see that the problem still exists, it's just that it's now shifted. And so that's our concern. The stop sign, I think, was a great move, and you can already see that because people are forced to stop, now there's a natural flow of traffic. If I need to take a left or I need to go a right to the light, there's time to do that. The cars are forced to slow down. One consideration is to put a stop sign at Prairie and Franklin as well. And even though it will slow traffic down on Prairie, there's value. I mean, Prairie was not ever designed to be a main thoroughfare. It's a 30 mile an hour. It's become that because of the traffic on Ogden, I think. So I think we're very much, as a community and good neighbors with many of our friends next door, very concerned about a good environment for their block. We just want to make sure it's a good environment for the neighborhood, and that would really be my case. So thank you for that consideration.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else? Okay, we will continue on to item 6, our consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you all. That takes us to item 7 on our agenda tonight. This is our active agenda portion of the meeting. This is where we plan to take action on items previously discussed, sometimes at our last meeting, sometimes for multiple meetings prior. Is there a motion concerning an ordinance amending traffic control?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending traffic control provisions for various intersections along Fairmount Avenue as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the audience on this one? Any questions or comments from the council? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. That was our only active item, so we're on to item 8 on our agenda. This is the first reading portion of the meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we plan to discuss items either for a first time or sometimes for a multiple opportunity, but we do not plan to take any formal action on these items tonight. With that, over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item on tonight's first reading agenda. It's consideration of an ordinance amending certain liquor license classifications and restrictions. Here to present background information on this item is our village attorney, Enza Petrarca.
Thank you, Dave. Mayor and Council, the proposed ordinance before you makes 3 changes to the village's liquor code. First, it creates a new license classification called the Salon license classification, which allows the sale of beer and wine at salons, defined as establishments where the public may receive grooming services, including nail salons, hair salons, and barbershops. It specifically excludes massage establishments. There are certain restrictions contained within this classification. Beer and wine will only be allowed to be served to patrons receiving salon services. Service is limited to only 3 drinks per patron and further limited to 12 ounces of beer and 6 ounces of wine. Currently, staff is proposing that the salon licenses, the number of licenses available be capped at 5, just to start with. That can be further amended with council approval, depending on the requests that we receive. The second change that the proposed ordinance makes is removing the restriction on the sale of alcohol at gas stations, so thereby allowing gasoline stations to qualify for P license classification, provided that alcohol and tobacco products be limited to 25% of the retail sales area. And finally, the last change the proposed ordinance makes is a change to our delivery provisions. As you may recall, a couple months ago, we made some changes to our ordinance allowing for delivery services. Well, just about a month ago, the state changed the state law and preempted home rule authority, so we have to comply with state law. Basically, we now have to allow all licensed establishments, both on-premise and off-premise, to allow delivery services and prohibit brew facilities from delivering. Those are all the changes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Enzo. Anybody got any comments or questions to start this conversation?
I'll start.
Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed in the Liquor Board's recommendation, they did talk about a limit of drinks from a time standpoint. I think it was 1 per hour. And I think, first I should say, I like this idea. I think this will bring some vitality to and some experiential that salons are looking for. And so I support that. I would like to see, I think I would support a limit by time. I think the petitioner for the license mentioned that their service was about an hour in length, but this would apply to salons that have services based on my anecdotal research on cut, color, and dry. That might be longer than that. And so given that came from the board, the commission, I should say, and seemed to be in line with how some other successful towns and cities have done it, I think I would support that a bit more. That's all comment I had.
I'll touch on that a second.
Mm-hmm.
This part of this came through me. I had asked the Liquor Commission to consider this, and then, of course, got their recommendations after their meeting and helped Enzo with what's presented here tonight. I think we don't limit that way in anything else. We have 140 or 50 liquor licenses of various classifications, and none of them are time-driven. What we're concerned about generally is we sort of ask that question about public concern or public role in regulation. And I think, from my perspective, the issue is over-service or service to underage. Is where at the time, whether somebody has, 1 drink or 2 drinks over 1 hour or 3 hours is, in my mind, there's no particular public benefit to that. It's the over-service and the underage service that I think is where our focus is. So this would, if we would include that, it would do 2 things. One is it would make it a unique license. None of the other licensed liquor sellers and servers have that same restriction. And I struggle to see where it would provide a particular benefit beyond the existing regulations that we have. So that's the logic. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but that's the logic of excluding that portion of the recommendation. Anyone else? Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take them in reverse order that Enza presented them. We have to come in line with state law when it comes to delivery. That is what it is. In terms of establishments selling gasoline, if there's a convenience store that happens to also be selling gas, I don't see why we should treat them any differently than a convenience store that doesn't sell gas. So in my mind, this makes a lot of common sense. As far as the salons, I agree that it seems to be an expanding and growing type of business that's offering this particular service, and I see no reason not to go with the trend. If salons would like to go in this direction, let's see how it goes. I do share the mayor's voiced concerns about serving folks who are underage and making sure that over-service is not an issue, but I know they'll have to go through the proper training to be able to identify all of these various situations. So I have confidence that we'll have compliance with the regulations we put in place. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Leslie, please.
Not to repeat everything that's said, for the most part, I agree with what Commissioner Jose just said. All of the things as written are pretty reasonable to me, and I think that, and just to add, I think that 5 is a good place to start for the salon, just to kind of dip our toes in the water and see how it goes. Yeah.
Rich, please.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit and Commissioner Jose. I think I understand Commissioner Gilmartin's concerned about too many drinks too soon, but I guess my concern with that is it could place an undue burden on the servers, almost having to have a stopwatch on each individual. So I think in practicality it might be pretty difficult. The other night we were out for wine and appetizers, and the happy hour was finishing at 6, so I still had a glass of wine, and then I ordered my other one to get it in under the wire. I didn't drink it right away, but so I think there are.
Cheapskate, huh?
We've all done it.
Move the strike.
So I thought it was the frugal thing to do to get it at a better price. Only later did I find I ordered the wrong wine for that, so it's no personal benefit to me, but that was at least the logic behind that. As far as the gas station thing, I think it levels the playing field where somebody who we'd like to have spend their money in Downers Grove could be at Belmont and Ogden and decide, I'm going to go to Belmont and Maple because I can pick up a 6-pack on the way home. So I think that levels the playing field for those unincorporated areas that are very close to us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try not to repeat too much. Salon license, liquor license, I feel like I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I feel comfortable capping it at 5. And I do think that allows our businesses in town a little bit of a competitive edge. There are already a lot of salons out there that do this. So I feel comfortable with it, and I feel comfortable capping it at 5. I may be alone here in the gas station liquor license. I think on the survey we looked at 19 different municipalities. 11 of them do not allow it, and 8 of them do. It's actually pretty split. When I tried to do my very amateur own research on this, again, we're all amateur researchers up here. So in doing my own amateur research, I saw that a lot of the issues that these communities felt were easier access for underage minors, easier access for them to obtain alcohol, I don't know. This was the only one that I was a little conflicted on, but I may be the lone person up here on that. So jury's still out for me on that particular topic. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The underage service should always be a concern for all of us. And as Greg indicated, there's some training that's required and some regular checks by our team to try and ensure compliance. That would apply to anybody that's got a liquor license, irrespective of the class. I think one of the things about the gas station issue that is on my mind is, I think you can say, and again, we're amateur researchers, right? So this is anecdotal from Bob, so take that for whatever it's worth. But gas stations seem to be increasingly, across the country, increasingly convenience stores that sell gas as opposed to gas stations. And so it wouldn't surprise me to find that just like we were sort of behind the curve on the Salon license, if you will, that there were others that were kind of behind the curve on the gas station license. That I think that the gas stations in general, you think back to, well, in Downers, we got the perfect example in recent history at 63rd and Main. It was a true service station 2 years ago. Now it's really a convenience store that happens to sell gas. And I think that repeats itself over and over. We saw it at the Mobile, which is now a Powder Mart at Belmont and Ogden. So in my mind, it really falls along the lines of the way Greg described it, a convenience store that happens to sell gas. So it doesn't make it right, but that's sort of the logic pattern behind it. It could just be a different spot in time compared to our neighbors. Chris?
Yeah, I didn't mention this earlier, and I'm not sure this is this may be splitting hairs a bit, but given the survey showed the percentage of retail space for gas stations in the areas, different towns that had it, was far less than the 25% that's being proposed. I wonder my fellow commissioners' thoughts on that. I think 10 was the highest anywhere near us, and I think the perspective of a convenience store that happens to sell gas puts it definitely in a perspective of, well then, if you don't sell gas, why would it be any different? 25 just for some reason stood out to be high, and maybe that's because in my amateur researching of the survey that was provided, it was more than double what anyone near us had in terms of space. So again, I don't know that that's something that I'm totally opposed to, but it seems like maybe there's some logic behind that maybe we want to take a look at.
Greg, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I really don't see what the concerns would be that would be different when it comes to a gas station with a convenience store that's selling alcohol versus any 7-Eleven or any other liquor store you might find, or any other really store that's selling alcohol. I don't know what the magic difference is between being able to also buy gas where I'm buying the alcohol. If we're going to cut from 25% in this ordinance, then you should probably do it in every other ordinance.
Yeah.
I don't see the principal distinction.
I suspect this is where Enza's probably grinding her teeth. Wish Bob would stop talking.
Got rid of the mask.
But I think that 25 is, I'm going to use the word arbitrary, which is probably what's going to make people crazy. But I think the point of that is to try and create a number, whether it's 25 or 15 or 10, that makes it so that that entity doesn't become essentially in effect a liquor store. I think that's the goal.
Right.
And so I don't know if the magic is 10 or magic is 15 or 25, but do we think that limitation is sufficient obstruction to becoming just a liquor store? So Greg's point is, I'm sure that's where that came from. It was essentially a copy from our existing convenience store license logic. And so I don't know what the magic number is, but that's the point behind it, I'm sure. So to see another community pick a different number is understandable. Anyone else? Any comments or questions from the audience on this subject? We're not going to act on this tonight, but certainly welcome any input. Please, come on down the microphone.
I heard you talking about the nail salon thing and limiting, I don't know where the conversation ended up, but I can recall being in places where people, when they come in, are offered tickets, and if they use them, they use them. That's how you control how much they get. So we can Would you like drink tickets? These are the limits. Just something to think about.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else want to touch on this one? Okay.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. How about a manager's report?
Now, we have a couple items to present tonight under the manager's report. First, I will start off with the FY21 budget update, and then after that, I'll turn it over to Michael Casta from the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation for his quarterly report. What I have tonight is an update on the implementation and management of the current year budget. This presentation is focused on our general fund, which is our main operating fund. 4 sections tonight in the presentation. I'll start by providing background information on the FY21 budget. Then I'll present staff's updated revenue estimates for the year and recommended actions based on those current revenue estimates. And finally, the current expense estimates will be presented. Here's the key message of the report tonight. Staff expects that the FY21 revenue will be about $4.6 million greater than we budgeted. This allows the village to proceed with filling vacant positions and avoid using money from the Major Buildings Fund to cover operating expenses. So in short, this is all great news. You may recall that the FY21 budget was prepared in late summer of 2020. The economic uncertainty present at that time made it very difficult to forecast revenue performance for 2021. To address that issue, the FY21 budget was prepared assuming that revenues would perform in the same manner that they were performing in the third quarter of 2020. And that is just not the case. The budget document notes that the actual revenue performance may vary and that the village would actively monitor revenue performance and make adjustments to the budget as more information would become available, and that's where we are right now. Looking back, you'll recall that the FY21 budget reflected a financial gap of $4.8 million. And to address the shortfall, or the expected shortfall, expenses were reduced by $2.3 million, revenues were enhanced by $1 million, and $1.5 million in the Major Buildings Fund was planned to be transferred into the general fund, basically functioning like reserves. One of the key expense reduction efforts was the delay in filling certain staff vacant positions. They were vacant at the time we prepared the budget. Other cost-saving measures, you can see here on the slide, were also planned. So staff has prepared updated revenue estimates based on our review of village revenue performance to date. General fund revenues are estimated to be nearly $4.6 million higher than shown in the FY21 budget. Even without the transfer from the Major Buildings Fund, the total general fund revenue is now expected to be about $52.3 million. Key drivers, what's happening here? Key drivers of the expected revenue performance are shown here on this slide. State income tax is projected to be $1.6 million more than budgeted. Sales tax and local use tax together up by about $2.1 million. Food and beverage tax revenue now looks like it'll be $600,000 better than we originally budgeted. Simply put, economic performance is much better than we expected at the time we prepared the budget. So all of these budget actions that we talked about earlier, we are now in a position to not do them. That means the improved revenue performance will allow the village to not make a transfer from the Major Buildings Fund to the general fund. And staff feels comfortable filling the vacant positions, and in fact we have done that, and I've kept the council apprised of that. And also we don't have to take any of these other temporary, non-sustainable cost-cutting measures that were used to fill an expected gap. Taking these budget-related actions will increase the cost, or the expense side, by about $1.7 million. We now estimate total annual expenses of about $50.9 million. The budget will remain balanced with revenues exceeding expenses. That is our current projection. In summary, staff expects FY21 revenue to be about $4.6 million higher than budgeted, allowing us to take actions that are more typical of a normal year. And staff will continue to monitor budget performance and report our findings to the Village Council. In fact, the next one will probably be as introductory comments to the proposed FY22 budget, which is coming up in a few months. Happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Any questions? Chris, please.
Was the increase concentrated in any particular time period, or was this sort of rolling through the beginning of the year to now?
Economic performance picked up as the year has gone on and continues to be strong for several months in a row now.
Anyone else? I got a couple of questions, Dave. One is, on the expense side of things, do you have any commentary on year-to-date prior to reinstituting some of the previously intended cost-cutting things? In other words, how was the performance of the things we were planning on doing from an expense side? Be interested in that. You understand the difference that I'm asking?
I don't think so, but I can follow up with you afterwards. I can tell you that the expense reduction efforts were working quite well, and we were on track. And now that we have gone back to sort of more typical sustainable operations, we're still mindful of every dollar and good stewards of taxpayers' money, and so therefore the expenses are going to come in less than the revenues.
I don't doubt that for a minute. It's sat up here long enough to know that we're really blessed to have a team that thinks and acts that way. Mike, you were on the right path. We'll talk a little bit more later.
Will do, Mayor. Thank you.
And then the other thing is, I just wanted to remind everybody who might be watching at home, this budget that was created that we're adjusting was, Dave alluded to it earlier, it was created in Q3 or based on Q3 data. In 2020, we had to make huge adjustments. Everybody knows why. And what we did was took what we thought was a conservative transitionary approach to 2021. And the good news is that things are performing a little better. The truth is we chose not to do some things that we have historically done and that we really thought from a good government standpoint we should do. We chose not to because we weren't sure we could afford to do them. So this is not in some sort of an expansion or growth. This is a return to the work that we really believed we should be doing. We're fortunate to be able to do it. And we'll undoubtedly continue to keep a hard, close eye on all of our expenses. Thank you for everything your team does.
Well said, Mayor. Thank you for council guidance on this, and it's much easier to make these adjustments this way than it is to go the other way. So part of the Downers Grove way. And if I could, this is a great opportunity to actually transition over to Michael Casa, President CEO of our EDC. Some of the questions that were brought up by council members, he's going to have more insight into, especially some revenue trends and a lot of good news. Michael, and if you need your funds here, here it is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Michael Casa, I'm President and CEO of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, here for our quarterly report. Our office is at 5159 Mokel in downtown Downers Grove. We start with some economic data. As Dave indicated, the news is good. Boy, is this a far cry from a year ago when I was before you with data that was not so good. What a difference a year makes. So the most recent month when there's data from the state is the municipal sales tax revenues. You can see that, and by the way, we have put both 2019 and 2020 comparisons. 2019 represents normal times, and 2020, of course, was the major year, first year of the pandemic. So the sales tax revenue, the municipal sales tax is up 28% in June year over year, and was up almost 22% over 2019, which was an excellent year. The home rule sales tax revenue is up. June of 21 was up 45% over 20, and was up 20% over the same month in 2019. We have some breakdowns to show you. This is the municipal sales tax revenues by sector, and the most recent reporting period is the second quarter of '21. There are four that I wanted to single out. The first is the furniture, home improvement, and electronics sector, which is up 114% over 2020 and 21% over 2019. Like a lot of retailers, there were periods in 2020 in which they were actually just closed. Lumber, building, and hardware is essentially the hardware and home improvement industry. We're up 9% over 2020 and 27% over 2019. And that has a lot to do with the fact there is a shortage of new homes to buy, and so people are repairing and improving their existing home. That's the literature has indicated that's why there's been such an increase at places like Home Depot. Automotive and filling stations, that's car dealerships and basically fuel stations. The municipal tax is up almost 50% over 2020. Not surprising when people were staying home in droves a year ago, but it's up 33% over 2019. Let me flip to, the last category is drugs and miscellaneous retail. The major part of that is pharmacies, but it also covers the gamut of a lot of miscellaneous retail businesses, but still numbers very strong, 64% increase over the same quarter, the second quarter of 20, and up 54% over the second quarter of 19. The home rule revenues, home rule sales tax revenues, again, I'll single four out. The first is the groceries sector, which is food. You'll see pretty much the same increase over the same second quarter in 20, 23% increase, and a 22% increase over 2019. The furniture and electronics sector up 113% for municipal sales tax, home rule sales tax in 20, and 21% over 19. Again, a lot of those businesses were shut down and closed last year. And the automotive and fuel stations, 73% increase over 20, and most of that is from the filling stations because of the home rule sales tax doesn't apply to titled products like cars, and a 15% increase over 2019. Going to hotel taxes, the only sector in which decreases are still prevalent, but it is declining, those decreases. So the municipal hotel tax revenue is up 227%. Not surprising, considering our two full-service hotels were closed for 4 months last year, and it was the worst year hotels had, frankly, on record. But, so the real test for us as managing the Downers Grove Visitors Bureau, who work very closely with the hotels, is comparing it to 19, which was a tremendous year for the hospitality sector and for especially hotels. So this number is trending, this decrease is trending downward, which is a good thing. Slowly, but it is trending in the right direction. So July of 21 for the local hotel tax revenue is down 23%, 23.4% versus 19. But again, it's much better than it was in the months leading up to July. Hopefully that trend will continue. Food and beverage tax revenue substantially has been increasing versus 20 for the same month, July of 20, compared to July of 21, up 81.2%. Again, reasons are obvious. A lot of the restaurants were closed or couldn't operate inside. But an increase of almost 67% over 19. Now, part of that is due to the fact the food and beverage tax was increased. The rate was increased from 1% to 1.5% starting in March of 21. Nevertheless, I think it's fair to say that not just in Downers Grove but around the country, the restaurant industry is back, and I know that makes Commissioner Glover happy. And of course, what's not back are the banquets at the hotels. And that is a source of revenue for the food and beverage tax. So as the hotels start to see events returning, meetings returning, that will have another positive impact on the food and beverage tax. Okay, let me shift gears here, and I want to talk about an important part of our recently adopted strategic plan, which myself and our board chairman, Bob Fernandez, had the opportunity to present to you on August 3rd. Thank you for letting us have that opportunity. So a key component of the plan is key performance indicators, which will permit us to track performance in all the different parts of the plan. Those will be tracked annually and quarterly. There are some data that is only available annually, but most of it is available on a quarterly basis as well. So we typically do our annual report in the first presentation of a new year. In this case, it'd be March of 22, because then we would have all the data in from 21. So we will present our annual report, and these key performance indicators will be presented in an annual basis. And the numbers will be from all of 21. But then when we do our quarterly presentations, we will have these indicators for the most recent completed quarter. Again, sometimes the data comes in slow, sometimes it's not available on a quarterly basis. We'll work around that. We're also going to create a template, which is, I think, going to be good for people that are looking at the data, so that you can compare it month to month. The indicators will be the same, in the same format. It'll also be easy for our staff just to kind of plug the numbers in, plug the data in to the same template. But I want to go over with you what those indicators will be that we'll be reporting on. And I focused on the economic business development indicators, which are the ones that are the most prevalent in our plan. So on tax revenue, core sales tax revenue that is generated, food and beverage tax revenue, we've been doing this, same with the hotel tax, so nothing will change there. EAV, we're going to start reporting this by sector, commercial, downtown, industrial, and office, and of course this will be the data will be annualized. The next one is occupancy rates by sector, and it will include commercial. So example, what are the occupancy rates on Ogden Avenue? This is not going to be easy to pull together because frankly most of the real estate consulting firms and real estate companies pretty much focus their data on industrial and office, but it is out there and we will pull it together. Same with the downtown. What are the occupancy rates for the downtown commercial area? Industrial and the office sector. Next, under tourism and marketing, there are three specific indicators we'll be looking at. The first one is the performance of our hotels. And we're going to publish the data that we're permitted to publish. We receive information on what's called the STAR report, which gives performance of hotels. Most of that information is proprietary, and for us to receive it, we agreed that we were going to keep it confidential. However, there's a way for us to present some of the data, probably more for all of the hotels combined, and how they're doing on room rates and revenue per guest, things like that. Sports and group travel leads provided by the DuPage Convention and Visitors Bureau. Sports travel is going to become more and more of an important part of our strategy. It's the fastest growing sector among tourism in the United States. And now something like 30% of all family travel is related somehow to sports. And that would include when Dave and his wife and one of their kids drives to Schaumburg to watch the other child participate in a sporting event. That's sports tourism. He's staying in a hotel perhaps. He's spending money at a restaurant. He's helping that Schaumburg economy. We need to get a piece of that business. And the third one is, on our marketing side, we want to start tracking analytics on our digital marketing, which is pretty much all we do now. And I'm sure Commissioner Gilmartin, I'm going to want to talk to you about that. It's a very important thing to be able to do that. Items that we're calling our economic drivers in the plan. These are important new parts of the economy that Downers Grove needs to be aware of and participate in. The first one is business retention. So last year, and I love the mayor's term, we pivoted to retention. We're not going to go back and forget about that again. It's going to become an even more important part of our work. Part of that is on an annual basis, we'll be able to provide the retention rate within each sector. How we're doing on industrial, how we're doing on office. And that could even be broken down by specific area. So the Ellsworth Business Park versus the Oak Grove Commons Business Park. And basically, how many businesses are we retaining versus how many that have left town to move somewhere else. Now, when a business closes their doors, that does not impact the retention rate because they didn't move anywhere else. We didn't lose them. They just ended their time as a company. But that's going to be very important for us to track as we go forward. The local employment and unemployment rates. So talent attraction, which is the new term that kind of replaces workforce development, is not only is important now, it was important before COVID, and it'll be important years from now. Survey after survey shows that in the United States, all businesses, especially those that are making location decisions, name the availability of labor as their number one factor in making a decision on where to locate. We get calls all the time from the hotels, the restaurants, manufacturing companies, retailers. You got to help us find workers. So we are going to invest some time in sort of trying to be like a clearinghouse for resources for job training and for employment services that are provided at the state and county level. And the last one is going to be a very important one in the future, but a difficult one. It's the promotion of entrepreneurship and innovation in our community. And this needs to be an extension from the county and from the region. No question that the city of Chicago has established themselves as a major national center for entrepreneurship and innovation. They spend millions and millions of dollars promoting this. Started with 1871. And so it's an important part of any community's future economic vitality. Tracking this is going to be really difficult. I had lunch today with someone who is on our board, Maureen Dunn from College of DuPage. She's an expert in this area, and she said, the problem is there's no one central place you can go to that talks about startup companies. Did they receive funding for their venture? There's a variety of sources where you can go, and we're going to try to develop a tracking mechanism in addition to promoting entrepreneurship and innovation to our residents. And then just some general business attraction indicators. The capital investment and job creation for new projects. What makes this a little difficult is that a lot of companies, while they'll be happy to tell you how many new jobs they're creating, sometimes they're a little shy about revealing how much money they're investing in a project. But we will do our best to get that information. The status of the Ogden TIF and the status of Ellsworth remediation agreements. We play a small role, as does the village attorney and the village manager, in helping facilitate future remediation agreements for the cleanup of the contaminated portions of the Ellsworth Business Park. I'm happy to say that following a meeting that was held in Dave's office in December of 19, the EPA has really become aggressive in pursuing these agreements. The current project that Bridge Industrial is doing in the former Magatrol site has been fully remediated. Rexnord fully remediated their property, and now they're in the process, they're this close to signing an agreement for remediation at a company, I can't name it yet, but it's one of the largest businesses in Ellsworth, and they're right on the cusp of signing an agreement. And that's just an important thing. It won't get done overnight, but little by little, someday we're going to reach a point where that cloud has been lifted off that part of Ellsworth. Just wanted to say thank you once again to the council for your tremendous support for economic development, to my teammates on the village staff. Just thank you for everything you guys do for the community and for economic development. And I'll be happy now to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone got any questions for Michael? Rich?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Do we have a way to track metro ridership downtown? And that leads up to my second question is, are we seeing offices relocate from downtown to the suburbs in the wake of COVID? And do we have any feeling for work at home, if that is changing the nature of the office climate in Downers Grove and in DuPage County?
Those are all excellent questions. The first one's easy to answer, and that is the Metro tracks ridership on all of their stations. So that's a number we can easily get for the Main Street station. The second question is, we are starting to see some Chicago office tenants consider relocation to the suburbs. But we are still seeing office tenants in Downers Grove looking toward the city for a relocation. Now, in both cases, it usually accompanied by a dramatic decrease in their square footage of their space. What's usually happening is their lease is either coming due, and if they were planning to move to the city, they are continuing that. They probably got put on hold during COVID, during 2020. They're going to continue to do that, although now they're going to take less space. So they're shedding square footage. Same thing in the reverse. Companies that are in Chicago that are looking for space here are dramatically decreasing their space. The third one is, Rich, I don't know Commissioner Culvaney, I don't know the answer to that yet. I had lunch a week ago Monday with the two brokers for that Esplanade, Dave Andrews and Phil Sheridan, and it's literally company by company making the decision. Are they going to allow hybrid work schedules? What percentage are required to come back? What are at the discretion of the employee? I think we'll have a better handle on that next year, but people that do this for a living don't know the answer to that. It does appear that the trend seems to be that companies are saying we'll have everyone come back in 22. That's what I'm hearing. But again, if you've got a lease you've got 10 more years on your lease, and you've got 100,000 square feet, and you're going to let employees continue to work from home, you don't need that 100,000 square feet anymore. But you've got a lease, you've got to pay for it. So what they're doing is they're going to the sublease market. And the sublease market in the Chicago area and throughout the United States has exploded. There's so much space available that is currently under a lease, and then you're basically taking over a portion of that lease and then trying to negotiate an extension with the existing landlord. It's really, that sublease market is also driving down rents. Companies are willing to take less rent than they're actually paying because they're not using the space anyway. They still see it as a way to kind of offset some of their cost. But I think all this will kind of shake out next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Anyone else? Chris?
Yeah. A few questions, Michael. Similar to the question I asked before, when you look at June in comparison to previous months, and July, are they outliers in relation to January, February, March, April?
I don't have that data with me, but I believe that it was starting in March and April, because when you compare those to 20, that's where you saw the dramatic increases. And then it's continued since then, and I suspect it'll continue for the rest of the year. The challenge will be that when you start looking at year-over-year numbers in 22, those will be compared to 21, and 21 is seeing these dramatic increases.
Sure.
So we're going to continue next year as well to compare them to 19, to 20, and to 21, because right now it's so skewed. And depending on what year you're comparing it to. So we look at the hotels next year, let's just assume that the hotels have really cut into their decline, you may see, we're maybe 10% away from 19, and we're way ahead of 20, and we're somewhat ahead of 21. I think you almost can graph it out to show that everyone wants to be back to where they were in 19, and there are some industries that have passed it, and like the restaurant industry, people we're so pent up, tired of eating from home, that when the restaurants were allowed to reopen, they ran to them. We'll see if that trend continues in 22. But I think it's these multi-year comparisons we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, I think as a comment, I think the reason I was most curious about June and July is I think that's when you saw the vaccinations happening at the highest number because it was opened up. And so I think we need to look at that as we look at projecting forward. That was pent up. It was also a feeling of safety that people hadn't experienced for almost the year prior to that.
Yes.
So we should be optimistic but cautious in how we look at that. The second question I had was around what your thoughts are when we compare it to 19. So it seems like a lot of growth. So that's sort of trying to take somewhat of the pandemic out of it. If you have any thoughts generally about why we saw so much growth in those areas that we did in comparison to 19.
Great question, and this is the best answer I can give. Let's use the restaurant industry as an example. There was so much pent-up demand that people have been going to restaurants maybe normally more than they normally would. And that's why we're beating the 19 numbers. It's because there was not this pent-up demand in 19. It was just normal. So, it'll be very interesting to see in 22 if the demand, for example, for home improvement will continue. I mean, if Commissioner Jose has improved his home, he may not need to do that in 22.
Yeah.
So it's people have been held back spending money, and they're spending it in 21 at a level that they weren't spending it ever, because it's like they're spending their 20 money in 21. So I think that accounts for why consumer spending around the country is exceeding the 19 levels. It's just that pent-up demand that may not be there in 20, and should be in 22. We're going to have to be careful and just track it.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I think there's a lot of things around 19 versus 21. I just didn't know if we, specific to the village or specific to these numbers, had any further insight locally as to why that might have been. People were pent-up demand. They were ordering 2 dinners instead of 1. I'm sure that's what was happening. The last thing in the entrepreneurship, so I'm very excited to see the dashboard and the metrics that you'll be using. That is exciting to, I think, many of us who are very interested in tracking this stuff, because now as we move into what I think is going to be more uncertain times, as we move into the season that it peaked for us last year, it's going to be important that we're tracking these things as close as we can, and this kind of information. It's likely trailing, but at least it can give us an indication of what may be to come. So very much looking forward to that. And to your comment, happy to help in any way that I can. The entrepreneurship and innovation, I'm just curious about what your thoughts are, if there has been much thought to how, as the EDC, you plan to try to drive those opportunities. Because I agree wholeheartedly that's a huge area of opportunity, but it is complex, it is difficult, not to say least of which office space and tracking those things that you mentioned, the College of DuPage contact that you talk with. I'm just wondering if you have any preliminary thoughts on how we as Downers Grove, which I think is prime for that given our location even to the city and other areas, how the EDC might be thinking about ways to bolster that or jumpstart some of those efforts.
Thank you. The basic answer is that we are still working on that strategy. Again, I had lunch today with Dr. Maureen Dunn, who is the chairman of the College of DuPage Board of Trustees and serves on several innovation and technology councils. It's going to take us probably close to a year to develop a real strategy. And one of the reasons is that sector is all over the map. For example, when there are so many places where an entrepreneur can go get funding, whether it's an angel a funding source, whether it's venture capital, whether it's a state or frankly in Chicago, a municipal-backed funding stream. Then there's the whole issue of where they go to get the training. There's a organization called Innovation DuPage, which we are going to work on a partnership with. They are a very small version of like 1871 in the city. I mean, the state, for example, has directed, it's over $1 billion for entrepreneurship and innovation to these institutions in the city. In many cases, they partner with universities like the University of Illinois, which has a program called Discovery Partners Institute. It's pretty much just for entrepreneurs and innovators in the city. But there is opportunities out there. So it's not only to identify what the strategy is, then we got to carry that message to our residents. And so developing what our strategy is, what we define as success, and then how do we track that? But we will keep you informed as to how that progresses. It is a brand new area for us.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Anyone else got questions for Michael? I've got a couple. I'm going to just ask if you can, you don't have to answer this tonight, but whether you can research a little bit. There's got to be somebody or some agency or some entity out there that's developing a bit of a conventional wisdom approach to this, whether it's pent-up demand or foregone sales, depends on which way, either way you want to look at it. Some portion of that growth, even comparing 19 to 20, is really sales that should have happened in 2020. And so understanding what kind of a discount to apply is, I think, something that would be important. Even if it's here, I've been talking to all the rest of the economic development directors, and here's kind of what we think. There ought to be it's an economic portion of the model that is, I think, pretty well known to exist. So somebody out there is trying to quantify it. I'd like to get some sense of that. The other question that's related to that is whether or not, particularly not so much on food and beverage, but on the other elements, there is in many of the instances, there's also a pretty substantial price increase that's happened in the last, really since August of 20. And so if we're taxing at a percentage rate, some portion of that growth that we've seen is really a function of not so much a unit or volume increase, but a price increase. And I don't know what that is either, but I'm wondering again if within the world of economic development, somebody out there or some group is developing some way to try and assess that. Because as we try and figure out what we think 22 and 23 look like, those are going to be really important, and maybe even more important than just trying to look at multi-years at one time. The other thing that I'd like to get a sense of, and I guess I could just probably apply it straight, but that change in the F&B tax rate is not insignificant. I mean, it's at least on the surface of it, roughly 30%, right? So whatever growth we have is probably discounted by that in terms of activity, economic activity in our restaurants. And then if you take that and try and apply some conventional wisdom for pent-up demand or excitement, it may move that 66% down to half or less. I mean, a third of it at least probably is just purely from the rate increase. So again, just if we could try and quantify those a little bit, I think that'd be helpful. On the metrics that we're doing, the dashboard stuff, if we could try and as we go forward, it's not often, but there are certainly times when we are, as a council, are presented with specific project information that it requires our participation or accommodation of some kind or consideration. Whenever we have those, since we're starting down this road now of developing a dashboard, it would be good for each one of those, think Village Green Sheet almost, right? That we would tick down each of these metrics. Some of them maybe don't apply. But for those that do, I think it would be really helpful for us as a decision-making process to understand which of those metrics that we're trying to move the needle on is this project specifically targeting. And then the last thing on my mind is you talked about retention, trying to quantify or at least get our arms around retention. Another piece of that would be really interesting to me if you thought you could do it is when we've got retention situations where we know we retained someone, did they also invest in some way? So did they just decide not to leave, or did they decide, I'm thinking Flavor Chem, that's an obvious one, did they decide not only to stay, but to double down or triple down on their investment in our community? It's critical for our community, top to bottom, residential, commercial, all of our sectors, including residential, and frankly, our own village, to be reinvesting all the time. And so just hold and serve is really not enough. So that's another thing. If you can make a note of, I don't know if there's any good way to capture that, because like you said, people may be reluctant to share that kind of information, but retention is only part of the game. Having those same people that choose to reinvest in our community is an important part too. So if there was a way to get our arms around it, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay. Let me go back and address your 3 questions.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to remember them too. And the first one is that in our strategic plan, it actually calls for a report to be put together, which looks at each of the sectors in our community and where those sectors are headed and what the implications will be in terms of village revenue and revenues in general. And that's something we're slated to do. And that may even be where we hire an outside consultant to help with that endeavor. And each sector, I suspect, will be different than the other one. Restaurants will be different than hotels, and
sure.
So forth. The second question is, I agree with you, when a company is looking for like an incentive agreement from the village, there should be an economic impact report that's presented, not just what their tax revenue will be, but basically what is the real economic impact that project is bringing to the community. That's another item that's in a strategic plan. We need to definitely do that. And the third one is, it's typically in my industry, it's called BR&E, business retention and expansion. So for those companies that are not just retaining their facility in Downers Grove, but they're expanding it. And in my industry, an expansion is defined by additional square footage. There's 4,000 businesses in Downers Grove. It's hard to track what each of them are doing within their business. However, when they are expanding, we are aware of that. It shows up on the village's building department reports, and those we can specifically single out. And then you can apply the same standard. In their expansion, what was their capital investment to expand? Did they add jobs? Is this going to increase their ability to generate tax revenue? So yes, the answer to that one is definitely part of BR&E. I use the term business retention all the time, but really it's about expansion as well.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Chris, please.
Just one more note. The furniture, household, and radio category, maybe radio could be updated to something that actually had an impact. I'm not sure how many radios were sold in Downers Grove, but maybe we can bump that up to TV or computer.
Yeah, that unfortunately we can do that. That's the line the state still uses. You're absolutely right,
Michael.
It is. People aren't really buying radios anymore.
Maybe add fax machines to the next report. That would be great. Thank you.
Betamax recorders.
Walkman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
I said one
Sorry.
one
go
other
ahead.
comment I've alluded to before, but I'd be interested to see the impact, particularly in places where we've made an investment. I think of Rexnord. I think of Packy Web, to be able to show our taxpayers that, yes, we did make that investment, and here's the return that we've gotten on it over years. Even things like Vequity, where we vacated that alley and didn't charge them for that. That was to help offset $250,000 that they had to pay to have the utilities moved. So I think that was a good investment on our part. But I think it would be a fair thing to be able to track that on a granular basis. And then as we get those metrics back, then that would help us inform our decisions moving forward, is if those things have worked out well. I know we do have clawback provisions, and we've always done a good job at that, but I think it would be a good way to inform our future decisions as we look at other investments.
On issues such as EAV, that is all public information that we can pull down, so we can clearly show what Rexnord was paying in real estate taxes prior to their redevelopment. Very hard to do that on the issue of sales taxes. It's just not information that's made public. But information that's available on these projects, we can certainly track those. And Dave and his team guard that information as they're supposed to very closely. You can't use some of that stuff for economic development purposes. But what we can produce, we will.
Okay.
So thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor's report done?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, it's our attorney report.
Thank you, Mayor. I only have one item to present, and that's an ordinance amending license classification and delivery provisions. Will be on the October 5th activation. That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item 11 on our agenda, mayor and council member reports. Tonight, we will start on my right. Rich?
Yeah, on a personal note, it's been 6 months since they released me from the hospital with my COVID experience. I still have some issues I'm dealing with. I can't really go any place if I'm going to be speaking without my cough drops. So it's an insidious disease, and they don't know why exactly it hit me, but I would really encourage people to overcome their biases and get vaccinated. If not for yourself and your family members, so that they can spare the difficulty. And one of the things that strikes me about this disease is it's passed from human to human. It's not passing from animals to human beings. And either you're getting it directly from a human, or they're touching something and you're touching it, and then you're getting it. So I still believe that vaccination is the best preventative. And the closer we get to a decent level of vaccination, the sooner this disease will go away for us all.
I'm glad you're still with us.
Thank you.
Leslie?
Sure. It's actually good timing with the neighborly proclamation, because I just wanted to remind everyone that Youth Outlook, who works with LGBTQ plus teens, is going to be opening a drop-in center in Downers Grove at the First United Methodist Church next month. So keep an eye out for that.
Thank you. Nicole?
I have no report, Mayor. I know, I've given it up to everybody else.
Danny?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, just one thing. Our friends at the Downers Grove Park District will be holding 3 open houses to preview the long-term master plan for Walnut Park. These open houses will provide a site walkthrough and offer the public a review of the draft conceptual drawings of the new Walnut Park. More importantly, these open houses are designed to get feedback on the plan and the concept drawings from the public. It's being billed as Help Plan Your Park event, and I encourage anyone who's interested to attend one of these open houses. They'll be held Tuesday, September 28th from 4 to 6 p.m., Wednesday, October 6th from 12 to 2 p.m., and Saturday, October 9th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And if helping our community plan its next great park isn't enough for you to go, you should know there will also be refreshments. For more information, you can go to ggparks.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say thank you to a resident who sent me a package. I've gotten a couple of packages in my time up here, and usually they involve either a lot of reading or a lot of negative feedback. But in this case, James Rafferty sent me a book. Which Side Are You On? Trying to Be for Labor When It's Flat on Its Back by Thomas Gay. And he did so in honor of Labor Day earlier this month. And I wanted to say thank you. I thought this was very, very thoughtful, and he included a heartfelt note. I'm not going to read much from it, but he talks about having gotten his first union card in 1972 to load UPS trucks at night to help pay his way through school, and then became a member of the International Association of Machinists as a cargo handler at O'Hare. And I don't know if Mr. Rafferty knew this at the time that he sent the book, but not only am I one of his elected officials, I'm also his lawyer. My firm represents the baggage handlers at O'Hare. So many thanks to Mr. Rafferty for his contributions to the labor movement, and many thanks for the book. I look forward to reading it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have no report. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.